So how exactly did the Revolutionary War unfold? Well, that depends on who you would ask. Some might point to the Boston Massacre as the spark, while others would trace it back to the Tea Act, and neither is wrong. Tensions built gradually like a snowball rolling down the hill. The real roots, though, go back to the French and Indian War. From 1754 to 1763, Britain and the colonies fought France for control of North America. And victory came at a staggering cost, and it left Britain deep in debt. To pay it off and to keep peace with the native tribes, King George issued a proclamation of 1763 barring colonists from settling west of the Appalachians. Now, land-hungry Americans saw this as the first betrayal of their rights. And that resentment exploded when Parliament began taxing the colonies directly to cover the war debt. It started in 1764 with the Sugar Act, followed by the Stamp Act of 1765. And they were taxing everything from molasses to every single sheet of legal paper, and even newspapers. And colonists erupted in protests with cries of no taxation without representation. The Quartering Act of 1765 only added fuel. This act forced the colonists to house and feed British troops in their homes. British backed down on the Stamp Act, but they doubled down with the Townshend Acts, taxing everyday goods like glass, paint, paper, tea. And this rallied the Sons of Liberty, who organized boycotts and street demonstrations across the colonies. What was worse about this is, to prepare for the Townshend Acts, King George sent thousands of British troops to serve as a sort of police state in Massachusetts. And in the midst of that unrest, in February 1770, an 11-year-old boy named Christopher Cedar, or Christopher Snyder, was shot and killed by a customs informant named Ebenezer Richardson. And this is the first blood that was spilled in what would become the Revolution. And just 11 days later, British soldiers fired into a crowd angry over the death of little Christopher, and that would become known as the Boston Massacre. These deaths just supercharged the colonial anger. Committees of correspondence sprang up to coordinate resistance, and leaders like Samuel Adams and John Hancock rose to prominence. And they fought the next outrage, the Tea Act of 1773, which wasn't really a new tax, but it gave the struggling East India Company a monopoly, undercutting colonial merchants. Petitions and protests against this failed. So on December 16th, 1773, disguised patriots dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor in what we know today as the Boston Tea Party. King George was so mad, he struck back hard with what's called the coercive acts. Americans fondly call them the intolerable acts. And this included closing Boston's port, gutting Massachusetts self-government, and allowing British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain instead of in the colonies. And this finally united the colonies. And in 1774, delegates met at the First Continental Congress, while local committees of safety prepared for the worst. And the worst came quickly. British generals issued warrants for Adams and for Hancock, and they ordered troops to seize colonial weapons at Concord. So on April 18th, 1775, Paul Revere rode, and he warned Adams and Hancock. William Dawes got to Lexington, and he warned them, but then he was booted off his horse. And Samuel Prescott, he was the one who made it to Lexington and Concord. And there was a fourth rider, Israel Bristle, and he was charged with riding down and telling the colonies what had happened. But either way, through the night, the alarm spread, and the next morning, the British regulars clashed with militia at Lexington and Concord, in what we know today as the shot heard round the world, and the war began. 2 months later, in June 1775, colonists proved that they could fight at Bunker Hill, mostly on Breed's Hill, inflicting heavy losses on the British, even in defeat. And that same month, the Second Continental Congress appointed George Washington commander of the new Continental Army. King George responded in August 1775 with the Proclamation of Rebellion, declaring the colonies in open revolt and promising harsh punishment. Reconciliation was dead. In July, of 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence, formally breaking with Britain. The war dragged on for 7 grueling years, with over 200 battles and skirmishes. Early disasters nearly broke the Patriot cause, but Washington's daring Christmas night crossing of the Delaware led to surprise victories at Trenton and at Princeton, saving the Army and reviving hope. The turning point, though, came in 1777 at Saratoga, where American forces surrounded and captured British General Bourgogn's army. This stunning victory convinced France to enter the war openly in 1778, as they'd been secretly funding it. And they provided money, troops, and most crucially, a navy. The winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge tested the Continental Army to its limits, but Baron von Steuben's training transformed it into a disciplined fighting force. And by 1780 to 1781, the war had shifted south, where Patriot militias had key victories at Kings Mountain and Cowpens, wearing down British forces and setting a trap for the endgame. This is also where the Swamp Fox came in, and the colonists used guerrilla warfare to take down British troops. In 1781, with French naval support blocking escape by sea, Washington and Rochambeau cornered British Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia. After a brutal siege, Cornwallis surrendered, and this effectively ended major combat. Peace came with the Treaty of Paris in 1783, recognizing American independence and granting vast Western territory. But victory exposed the weaknesses of the Articles of the Confederation, which couldn't enforce the treaty or manage the new nation effectively. So in 1787, delegates drafted the Constitution to create a stronger central government. Rightfully, though, several states refused to ratify without guarantees of individual rights. So James Madison proposed amendments. 12 were passed by the delegates and 10 were ratified by the states and became the Bill of Rights on December 15, 1791. Loosely, guys, that's the timeline. 1763 to 1791. Is that like 27, 28 years? Don't make me do math. Revolutions take time. But Josie, everything moves faster now. We have AI and we have the internet. Oh yeah? Well, our founders were upset about taxes and overreach for less than a decade, and they fought back. We've been pissed since 1913. So happy 250th anniversary to this great nation. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and stay free.